Hello, Dawn here, Women's Ministry. We're going to do the second part of Esther, the story about Esther. We did the first part last week, and this week we're going to do the second part. And the second part is when Esther requests to the king to set her people free. Yeah. So if you remember last time, they were going to destroy all the Jews. And so Esther's cousin came to her and says, hey, listen, they're about ready to kill all the Jews. And so Esther, being the queen now, wanted to go and talk to the king. But the problem is the king does not allow anybody to come into his area unless he's called. And if they do, then they can be put to death. Esther decided, well, let it be then, because I need to talk to him about these issues. So now she's going to take the chance of being killed or put to death because she's going to enter the area of the king without being summoned. So we're going to start on Esther 5. And that was halfway what we went through. So here we go. We're going to get started. Maybe have some coffee. Take some notes if you want. And we'll get started. So it's Esther 5. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robe and stood in the inner court of the palace in the front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw the Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her, and he held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. So here she's already got a good start. He's happy with her. So that doesn't sound like he's going to kill her, though. Huh? No. Then the king asked, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you. So he says he'll even give her the kingdom. That don't sound like death to me. But that's the way it was. If anybody else probably went, he'd say, up for their head. But Esther says, if it pleases the king, let the king together with Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. Bring Haman at once, the king said, so that we may do what Esther asked. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king asked Esther, now what is your petition? In other words, what do you want? It will be given to you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Esther replied, my petition is, and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and it is pleasing to the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question. So Haman raged against Mordecai. That's the next part. Haman's rage against Mordecai. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage and against Mordecai. Remember, Mordecai will not bow down to Haman. He refuses because he's a Jew, and he doesn't bow down to others. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. That's probably a good thing. When you're angry, just turn around, go the other way. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about the vast wealth, his many sons, and all the way the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all. Haman added on the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave. So he's really boasting it up, isn't he? And she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. So even though he had the glory and was gossiping, going, oh, look at me, look at me, look at me. As soon as he seen Mordecai, he got very angry. His wife, Zeresh, and all his friends said to him, have a pole set up, reaching to a height of 50 cubits. Do you know what 50 cubits are? It's about 75 feet, or 23 meters. And ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go to the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up. Wow. He had it set up, but do you think he's going to get away with it? I don't think so. Mordecai's honor. So that night, the king could not sleep. So he ordered a book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there, and Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. So they had planned on it, killing the king. But honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. So the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on a pole he had set up for him. So he's getting ready to impale him. I got my friend back there again. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. So they're telling him, Haman's in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? What do you think? What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? So he's thinking. So he answered to the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal cross placed on his head. Then the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. So, go at once, the king commanded Haman. Get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai, the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. I think he's being tricky there. So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights in honor. Afterwards, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief, and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is the Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. So he says, don't stand against him. You will surely come to ruins. So in other words, he can be ruined by trying to stand against him. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuch arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. I wonder, she must be a good cook. What do you think? Think she's a good cook to make all this feast for her? For him? Well, we're going to find out. So this one is about Haman being impaled. This is chapter 7. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king asked Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted, as he said again. The Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we have merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because such distress would justify disturbing the king. So the king asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is he, the man who has dared to do just such a thing?" But Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. That'd be kind of embarrassing. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" He fell right over on the couch with her. I bet you the king was really upset. I would be. As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. The Harbana, one of eunuchs attending the king, said, "A pole reaching to the height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai, who spoke up to the king." So the king said, "Impale him on it." Kind of went back onto Haman, didn't it? So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's anger subsided. So here, it kind of backfired on Haman, didn't it? It did. Because he wanted Mordecai to be on there, not himself. So, chapter 8. This is the king's edict on behalf of the Jews. So this is going to talk about what the king decides on behalf of the Jews. So that same day, the king gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. So the king finally came out to tell the king what was going on and how they were related. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, because he took the ring back, and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Wow. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman and the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. So she's pleading against that. Anything that was against the Jews, because he wanted them all killed. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if he regards me with favor and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he's pleased with me, Let an order be written overruling the dispatch that Haman's son, Hamdatha the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in the king's providence. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family? So the king replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai, the Jews, because Haman had attacked the Jews, I had given his estate to Esther, and they have impaled him on the pole he had set up. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews as seems best to you. So what is best? So they're going to change it. And seal it with the king's ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. So they're going to revise it. At once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd of the third month, which is March 23rd, the month of Sivan, I think it's Sivan, Sivan. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to be satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. So they summarized it through a long distance, 127 provinces. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also the Jews in their own script and language, so they made sure it was so that they could read it and understand it too. So Mordecai wrote in the name of the king, sealed the dispatches with the king's ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast on fast horses, especially bred for the king. So these were special horses that could go really fast. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city that the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them and their women and children. So it gave them the right to get rid of those who were trying to hurt them, and to plunder the property of their enemies. So plunder meaning they probably were able to take their property too. The Jews could take the other people's properties. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of the king was on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of those was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the couriers, riding a royal horse, went out, spurred on the king's command, and the edict was issued in the area of Susa. So, the triumph of the Jews. So when Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing a royal garment of blue and white and large gold of crown of gold and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews, it was time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor in every province and in every city to which the edict of the king came. There was joy and gladness among the Jews with feasting and celebration. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. Wow. So what do you think so far? What was accomplished? So here, so on the 20th day of the 12th month of the month, the edict command by King carried it out. On this day, enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. So that tells a lot right there. The Jews assembled in the cities and all the provinces of the king to attack those determined to destroy them. No one could stand against them because the people of all of the other nationalities were afraid of them. And all the nobles of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, the king's administrations helped the Jews because a fear of Mordecai had seized them. Mordecai was prominent in the palace. His reputation spread throughout the province, and he became more and more powerful. The Jews struck down all the enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. In the Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They also killed those around them that hated him. The 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammenath, the enemy of the Jew, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. So they did kill a lot of people that were against them, who tried to destroy them. But because of Mordecai, they had more power with the king, because the king gave Mordecai the power to do so. The number of those killed in the Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and 10 sons of Haman in the citadel of Susa. What have they done in the rest of the king's province? Now what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? It will also be granted." "If it pleases the king," Esther answered, "give the Jews the Susa permission to carry out this day at tomorrow also, and let Haman's 10 sons be impaled on the pole." So she wanted the sons to be impaled on the pole along with their father. So the king commanded that to be done, and an edict was issued in Susa, and they impaled the 10 sons of Haman. The Jews in Susa came together on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they put to death the Susa 300 men, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder, their belongings. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews who were in the king's province also assembled to protect themselves and get relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, but did not lay their hands on their, their possessions, plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. So, what did Queen Esther do? She saved the Jews. So in the end, Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent a letter to the Jews throughout the province of the king, near and far, to have them celebrate annually on the 14th and the 15th day of the month of Adar. So that's what they do now, or back then anyways. It's time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy and their mourning into a day of celebration, he wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy and giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. So they had a celebration. Yeah. Queen Esther, along with Mordecai, the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm the second letter concerning Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews in the province with goodwill and assurance to establish these days, designated times, as Mordecai the Jew and Esther Queen had decreed for them, and as they established for themselves and their descendants in regard to their times of fasting and lamentations. Esther's decree confirmed these regulations, and it was written down and recorded. So everything was recorded according to what had happened. And then the king imposed tribute throughout the empire to its distant shores. And all his acts of power and might, together with the full account of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted, are they not written in the book of the annals of the king of Media and Persia? Mordecai, the Jew, was second rank to the king, preeminent among the Jews, and held in the highest esteems by his many fellow Jews, because he worked for the good of the people and spoke of the welfare of the Jews. And this all happened because Esther became queen, and Mordecai had raised Esther. Do you remember what Esther's name was before she became queen? I encourage you to look it up. So Esther did great things with her cousin Mordecai, and together working for the better and the good of the Jews, to save them and to get rid of the wicked people. So she was a very great person, in the Bible. She showed courage and strength, didn't she? Yeah. So it's good to always have that strength and that courage, to do good for do good and do well for the people. And that's what I hope that you will take with this lesson, that you will go out and you will do good for other people too. Doing good for the people around you also brings you the light of what Jesus would have done too. Because remember, Jesus was a Jew, and he did a lot of good for the people as well. So I hope you take this with you, and we continue to read the Bible, maybe even read Esther over again. But it's one thing with her, she's a leader, and you can be that leader too in your community. So God bless you, and God be with you, and give all your strength to your community through courage and wisdom and strength. God bless you. You have a great day.